For my audience, EUR's audience, not familiar with your journey, your backstory, tell us a little bit about your journey into cannabis culture and what inspired this podcast topic.
So for me, my entrance into the cannabis industry was due to a crisis. I almost failed out of my freshman year of college. I got a 0.8 GPA. And my friend that made honor roll was like, try this. And I tried it because the DARE program lied, essentially. I was supposed to be on honor roll. He was supposed to be on academic probation as a cannabis user. And after I tried it, I was sleeping better. My moods were better. I felt more hopeful about life. I could just see the beauty in things. And since that moment, I kind of didn't realize that I was advocating. And then once I decided to make that just my full intention and I learned the science, it was kind of game over. And because the information was so difficult to understand, I decided what I would do is just make videos and put them on the internet so that people can understand the complexity of this industry. And it worked. And the concept of the podcast is actually Xzibit's idea, and he brought me in, but it's totally like aligned with what I'm doing for my purpose for the plant.
Welcome to the Lasagna Ganja podcast, your go-to podcast for everything culture and cannabis. I'm X to the Z Xzibit.
And I'm your girl, Tammy, aka the Cannabis Cutie, and I'll be here delivering the education, information, and anything cannabis related.
I've seen the music industry go from millions to $1 billion industry. And I've also seen cannabis, take on the same journey that maybe alcohol did after prohibition, and the misinformation that can lead us to continue to be left out of things is something that I want to combat. So when I say us, I mean like people of color, people who have been incarcerated for cannabis, and now as it turns into this $1 billion business, we don't get to participate. So the misinformation is something that I want to combat, and something that I want to put out there from, people from Wall Street to our towns, our city halls and town halls should know about what's happening, to legalization, to the actual benefits of the plant, and to bring this information to people so that they can make educated decisions about what this means in their life in a proper way.
Is there one particular surprising misconception that either of you have encountered? And if so, do you address it on your show? How do you address it on this podcast?
We definitely address a lot of misconceptions. The number one being it's a dangerous substance. When you think of like alcohol and cocaine, alcohol is not even on the drug scheduling list. And then cocaine would be Schedule 2, and then you have cannabis as Schedule 1. So the layperson, in their mind, they're thinking, oh, cannabis must be more dangerous than cocaine and methamphetamines. So what we do is a really good job of talking about drug scheduling, why it's even Schedule 1, and the fact that it is just a plant that can grow with sunlight and water and nothing else. And there's nothing evil about that.
Yeah, man, I'll be following that up with a whole bunch of bullshit. So it's going to be great. You guys will get a balance of everything we got going on, ranging from the people who put the seeds in the ground and the people that make the laws about whether we can smoke it or not.
That's why we're called Lasagna Ganja.
And then, of course, cannabis legislation, which you both have touched on, varies, as we know, greatly from one place to another, one state to another. How do you plan to keep your audience informed about the latest developments and changes in cannabis laws?
Well, we keep our hands on the pulse of what's happening. We live in California, which is arguably the largest cannabis market on the planet. So a lot of these things that happen here translate throughout the other states. So we feel like we are the boots on the ground. We are the voice of what's happening, and we can, deliver this information to people in a very entertaining way. And I think that's why we felt like this is the time for this podcast to come out.
And then, of course, we can't ignore the fact that cannabis has a long and complex history, both culturally and legally, of course. So we know the podcast is going to explore the legalities of this recreational spirit, as I want to call it. How do you plan to explore the historical, or do you plan to explore the historical and social aspects of cannabis in this podcast, Tammy?
Oh yeah, we're covering all layers. Historically, that's kind of my bread and butter, but also bringing on authors who have written extensively about the history is a great way to kind of communicate that. We're going to touch on from everything politically, legally, historically, scientifically, business. We're going to touch on all of it.
Mm-hmm. And then can you give us a teaser about any of the guests or experts you plan to invite on the show?
We plan on bringing, we plan on bringing everyone from the people who grow the plant all the way to the people who, enjoy the plant, music, musicians, sports, athletes, legislature, you name it. People who have access to the plant, people that mean to. We want to have everybody on. People that don't like the plant, people who do like the plant. We want all aspects, all layers brought to this forefront, and we want to make people really comfortable about and a trusted source of information. That's what we want to do with the podcast. It'd be easy to call up a couple of my friends and we just smoke on camera for 2 hours, but it's not that type of thing. We want to be informative. We want to be entertaining, and we want to bring all of this together so that you can come and make educated decisions about what this plant means to your life.
We're looking at all the layers of the cannabis industry, but there is no lasagna here.
Yeah, exactly. Don't expect any kind of food. It's not that kind of podcast, but we're going to get you high. So, you got to embrace these type of things.
Obviously, the cannabis culture is so popular and ever expanding. There's a lot of podcasts, perhaps, blog reports, think tanks, digital magazines around this subject. Tammy, what would you say makes Lasagna Ganja unique compared to perhaps similarly themed podcasts out there on this topic?
Well, one, we're funny. That I would say is a big differentiator. And two, you don't really see too many. They do exist, but male-female duo cannabis podcasts. And then also the fact that we're coming with education and information every episode. So I think that's what makes us different. We absolutely are going to be similar in the sense that we bring on people of influence, but I think we'll also be bringing on some heavy hitters that maybe you won't see on other podcasts.
And then, of course, I have to ask, Tammy, Xzibit, what makes you two the perfect dynamic duo? Because you're right. We haven't seen this dynamic in the space, and just the trailer alone is funny. And Tammy, I'm gonna be honest with you. I was watching the trailer and I'm like, she's baked right now in this interview. I know she is. Her eyes.
Absolutely.
So I think that's fun to see a woman in this space who's fearless, not afraid to tackle these subjects. Tammy and Xzibit, you can chime in on this too. What is the overall goal? What do you hope your listeners take away from this podcast series? What do you hope to leave them thinking about or talking about as it relates to cannabis and the culture?
Gosh, I want people to let go of their shame of their cannabis use. I am a mother. I have been to school twice. I run my own business, and I do it majority of the time while I'm high on cannabis. So I would love for people to understand that whatever you have preconceived notions about this plant, it's probably incorrect, and we're going to scientifically teach you what is correct.
I want people to take away that, not only is it entertaining, and informative. But you know that this is the go-to place on everything cannabis and culture. That's what I want to become for. That's my dream and my hope for the Lasagna Ganja podcast.
And then one last question for you, Tammy, because I have a relative and several friends who are exploring this industry from the, entrepreneurial side. I'm guessing, and maybe you can talk a little bit on this as we close out, this podcast will explore, this intersection of cannabis culture and social equity, I'm hoping, because I know a lot of people want to hear your perspective on this, perhaps Xzibit's perspective on this, and how challenging it seems to be for Black entrepreneurs to crack this industry. Tammy, what say you to that?
The plant touching side is really difficult. We've seen a lot of social equity programs fail in many states. So to people of color, I say, what are you good at? Are you great at marketing? Are you great at writing? Are you great at hosting, researching, designing? Whatever that is, we need that in this brand new industry. So maybe get your mind away from just being a retail owner or a cultivator, and think about all of the other businesses that would support the cannabis industry. The wealthiest people during the gold rush were not the people who were getting gold. It was the people who were selling the shovels and all of the supplies needed to get the gold. So that's one direction that I would love for people of color to look into, is ancillary, non-plant touching businesses.
And I can add on to that. I've created 2 really successful cannabis companies, and I'm also expanding into other states. I have my own dispensary coming on board. So as I can speak from that perspective, from where your friends are talking about the entrepreneurial side of what cannabis is. So that information will be front and center on the podcast as well.
Coming October 5th to all major podcast platforms.
Get ready to tune in and turn up with the Lasagna Ganja podcast. Let's go.